For a community dealing with so many issues, tobacco isn't a priority, but it is a silent killer. Our lives are complex and we know there are many underlying issues, so it is good to talk with someone who understands community. Quitting smokes can be a hard thing to do, but help is available. So today, I've come to talk with Carolynanha from Quitline. I'm Jody from the Quitline Aboriginal Liaison team in Perth, Western Australia.
I'm Carolynanha Johnson. I'm the Counsellor on Aboriginal Council on the Quitline for South Australia, Western Australia and Northern Territory. And I come from the Adnyamatna people in the Northern Flinders Ranges of South Australia.
Thanks, Carolynanha, for your time today. Can you just tell me a little bit about the Quitline service and how it helps our mob?
We reinforce that when people call us, it's a confidential service and we will not share their stories outside of the Quitline.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when you're looking at supporting Aboriginal people with their quitting, it's really important to remember that across the country, Aboriginal people have had the same history around colonisation.
Mm-hmm.
However, our experiences have been different, and that has ongoing effects for Aboriginal people today. And we invite people to talk about how some of those things may be affecting their ability to quit, make changes to their smoking. So we create that space for that conversation. So that's why we may have long conversations at the beginning. We might talk to them for an hour or so, but this is just to get them to talk, bring it all out, talk about what's happening. We may have 3 or 4 conversations about all this stuff that's going on around caring for family or the challenges they've had in the past, and then it sort of pushes all that stuff out of the way, and then we can focus on talking about how they can make changes to their smoking.
Within our communities, tobacco is not a high priority on our issues in regards to health and that. Can you tell me a little bit more about on how you would address that situation when one of our mob ring up to you?
Yeah, it's really important for us to be conscious that when someone calls us, we're not only there to hear their story about their quitting. So we have a model whereby we have to provide a holistic service.
Yeah.
So we get people talking about when they started, etc. But in amongst all of that, we get people to talk about their smoking and then their quitting in what we call a holistic way. So we're not only talking with them about physically what's going on for them, we talk about what's happening mentally, spiritually, culturally, and socially and politically. So what are those other things that are affecting the way people can make changes? And so, for instance, if someone's having challenges around mental health and being able to find extra support for themselves for their mental health, that can get in the way of their quitting. If people are having challenges around their identity because of stolen generation issues and connecting with country, we have that conversation also. We'll also have conversations with people around what it is that's going to get them through. So people are wanting to talk about their faith. Lots of our people have a Christian faith. They'll start talk about how prayer and their pastor and going to church is going to help them. So we create the space for them to be able to talk about all this stuff, because we know that there are a lot of issues and there are a lot of challenges. We are there to encourage them to talk about all that stuff, because smoking does not sit by itself in people's lives. It's kept going by all these other challenges. So when you have lots of deaths in community and in family, that loss and grief compounds. So there's a lot of gathering together around sorry business and supporting each other, and the healing that needs to come with that. So smoking can become, people can start to smoke more at those times. So we're willing to have those conversations. So unless we're willing to talk about all that stuff, we're not going to do the best for our clients.
So how do you start the conversation, the initial conversation, when we get one of our people ringing up?
We initially introduce ourselves. So when we're asking people questions about why they've given us a call, we will ask if they're Aboriginal, and if they identify that they are Aboriginal, we'll let them know that we're Aboriginal also, and ask them a bit about themselves. But we also are willing to let people know a little bit about ourselves, because about where we come from and who our mob are, because that's really important when we start having yarns with our people.
You know, our community, we have a lot of issues, and people just not only dealing with the smoking and all that sort of stuff. So how do you come across and support the people when they're talking to you?
My way of yarning to people about smoking, I use what we call a narrative therapy approach. And narrative therapy is getting people to tell their story, and in that we look at how they've been able to overcome challenges in their life and how they've been able to make a stand against whatever it is that's trying to pull them down, such as alcohol and drugs and gambling, and our focus is the smoking. So narrative therapy helps us support people to tell their stories in ways that make them grow stronger. So if someone's having a few challenges and saying, I'm finding this really hard to even think about it, I always ask them to have a bit of a think about what exactly is hard for them. Is it about thinking about the actual smoking, or is it about putting together a plan, or is it about getting other people to support you? What exactly are they finding hard about quitting? And then we'll build on that, and we'll ask them if they've been able to overcome other things in their lives. So if someone says, I've stopped drinking like 6 months ago, so then I ask them to tell me a bit about how they'd gone about that. And then I will pick up on those special skills that each person has and ask them to bring that to their quitting the smokes journey.
Sounds like you had a lot of experience over time with various callers and across all states and that.
I think in my experience, whilst I'm doing my counselling and yarning, I have images coming up in my mind when I'm talking to someone, and one specific image that always comes to mind is a tree trunk. So someone's, when they're having conversation with us, they're starting to chip away at that tree. They may talk about using the Champix or one of those nicotine products. That's another few more chips into that tree. They might talk about going out bush and taking their attention away from the smoking. That's another few chips into that tree. And they might use music or artwork. So I see those as all ways that they're chipping away at their smoking. So I see our calls, like if they're accepting our calls or if they're calling back in, that's another chip into that trunk. If they're looking at using other services that they can call into, these are all ways that people are working on moving that cigarette out of their life or chipping away at this trunk. And eventually, over a period of time, they will have knocked it down, pushed it out of their lives. We can have a whole lot of conversations around that, and we hope that while people are telling their stories, they're identifying within themselves ways to chip out the smoking and work towards their goal, whether that's they want to cut down or they just want to quit permanently, or they're just going to quit for a little while. Basically, it's however they want to do the quitting.
Yeah, it sounds like a great concept to use for our people out there.
Yeah, and some people, when I relate that back to people, they like that description, and then sometimes people may go on to say, well, I see it like this. So then it encourages them to talk about how they see their quitting in a different way, rather than them thinking of just throwing away that packet of cigarettes. They're able to talk about it in their own way and in their own language that they're wanting to use.
Taken on a community approach, how can community help an individual around tackling tobacco?
I think a community approach to tackling this smoking, tobacco, is very important, because what evidence has shown us is that smoking has become normalised in our community. So a high percentage of people are smoking in community, and it seems like it's an acceptable way of life. So when you have a whole of community responding and making a stand against the smoking, people are going to feel really supported in that environment. So when you have a look at a community now, we have a number of supports. So there would be the medical centres, the health workers within that, the doctors, people from different other areas. And there's also those tackling tobacco workers who are specifically trained to work in that area. And so if you go back to that tree again, when we're talking about that tree, if you have all these people in the community chipping away at the tree, using their skills, putting in their support, and people drawing on their cultural ways of making changes, using their spirituality, putting that all in the mix and putting that all into chopping away at this tree, and everyone making a stand. We believe that individuals are going to feel supported in that environment when everyone makes that stand against the smoking.
Sounds great. Well, thanks, Carolina, for your time today and sharing your knowledge and experience around working within Quitline. And wish you all the best within future calls that you get to Quitline.
Thanks, Jody, for that, and hopefully we'll have more yarns in the future.
No worries. Thank you.